You're going to go ahead and speak to us. But before we do that, Lori, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. Tonight we have Len Simich and Dave Jacobson from Southwest Transit joining us. Over the last year or so, we've kind of talked about different questions that we have about how transit works in our area, what options are or are not available to Victoria. And Councilmember Vogt and I spent some time with Mr. Simich a few months ago going over some of those questions, and we thought it would be great to have that conversation with the entire council. We don't necessarily have something that we're asking you for tonight, but this is really a get acquainted with how transit works and an opportunity to ask questions. So thank you to Len and Dave for being willing to be here with us tonight.
All right, thank you, Lori. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. If you would, please, for the record, state your name and your position.
My name is Len Simich. I'm the CEO of Southwest Transit, and accompanying me tonight is Dave Jacobson. He's our Chief Operating Officer. So you want me to jump right in?
Go ahead.
Do I need to speak right here, or can I step back a little bit? Does it matter for your...
Can we hear him?
Good?
Yeah, as long as we hear you. Yep.
All right, I'll try to speak up. Okay, I'm going to go through kind of the presentation real quickly because I know there's a number of questions. Councilmember Gregory was talking to me just beforehand, and there's a few things not in the presentation that I think you're going to be interested in. So I'm going to try to get through it rather fast. If there's something you want me to go back to, or if you have a question, please just interrupt at any time. A little bit overview of Southwest Transit. We're the provider for Eden Prairie, Chanhassen, and Chaska. Officially. Unofficially, we also have the city of Carver, who is in our system just temporarily under a grant situation. We have a commission that governs the Southwest Transit Commission. There's 6 members that are appointed by their member cities. One has to be an elected member. They both can be, which is the case of Chanhassen and Eden Prairie, but the bylaws only do require one have to be an elected member. The 7th member is chosen by those 6 and is an actual rider. And so it's a list of candidates that come through, and that position comes up every 3 years. And that's the term for each of these members. It's a 3-year term. We were established through some special legislation that was enacted back in 1983. And back then it was referred to as the opt-out transit legislation. In 1986, the 3 cities, Chanhassen, Chaska, and Eden Prairie, took advantage of that legislation and formed, through a joint powers, Southwest Transit. Currently, we operate about 160 trips per day with 75 buses. Our service options include downtown Minneapolis, the University of Minnesota. We have reverse commute service, bringing individuals from the central city out to job sites in our 3 communities. We provide special event service, like to the Minnesota State Fair, Twins, Gophers, Vikings, and so forth. And we have our local service, which we refer to as Prime, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. We have about $60 million in assets. That includes our property holdings, our stations, our garage, our vehicles. That's the major functions or the major components of our assets. Annually, we provide just shy of 1.3 million rides. We have been noted as a national leader in innovation, technology, and transit-oriented development. And for this, we've received multiple state and national awards. This gives a quick graph of our ridership from the beginning. Very modest at about 140,000 rides up to, like I said, just shy of 1.3 million last year. So it's been a nice growth trend. I wish my stocks looked that good, but that's kind of where we've been over the last 30 plus years. As I said, we're not known as a typical transit agency. We are different in the way we operate and the way we provide our services, but we think that's a good thing. We've had over 100% growth in ridership. We've had the highest percentage of use of our park and ride stalls of any operator in this region here, the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. Our on-time performance is 99%, again, highest in the region and amongst the highest in the country. Our vehicle breakdowns are over 3 times less. I always say 3 times more. No, 3 times less than the national average. Our express service is some of the lowest subsidized service in the region. Our Prime is the lowest subsidized demand response system in the region and one of the lowest nationally. Our customers, when we do an annual onboard survey, and that we have them captured for a half hour, so the response rate is very good. We have over 90% return the surveys, and as you can see, we've had over 99% customer satisfaction, either satisfied to very satisfied, and very satisfied is actually the highest of those two categories. Let's see, we introduced coach buses and transit-oriented development to the region. We were the very first ones to use those. Now pretty much everybody is. And the transit-oriented development, our biggest project, of course, is in Eden Prairie, where our station is. That was 22 acres that we brought in housing, commercial, as well as office and our station onto that site. We also have a small one that we've put up in Chanhassen, and we have plans for another one coming soon. And like I said, we've been recognized over 30 times by outside organizations. These are just a list of some of those, but the one big one is we are the National System of the Year through the American Public Transportation Association. So that's one we're very proud of. And then we do a number of things for the community, because not everybody takes our bus to downtown Minneapolis. They don't work downtown. They don't need to go downtown on a daily basis. So we want to make sure we pay back to our communities in other ways. So like as I mentioned, we have the special event services. We have a lot of outreach that we do to various groups in our 3 cities. We have senior services. In fact, we're hauling a group, Dave, lined up, I think, next week down to the Twins game from Chaska and Chanhassen, I believe. We have a job seekers program helping those in our area that are searching for jobs, and we provide them free transportation to do that with. We have a youth workforce, and there's a picture down below. Each summer we bring on about 25 youth, and they're all from our area, and they do everything from all of our lawn care to our painting to a lot of miscellaneous projects, which not only saves us money but gives them some very good work values as they go forward in their careers. We work with all of our cities and the county in emergency response and providing emergency services, anything from a shelter in place to evacuations, and we've done both. And then we do a lot of business outreach, working with our businesses to find out what their needs are as they ramp up seasonally or whatever the case may be. We try to match services for them as well for our reverse commute programs. The Prime, and this is the one that we've gotten a lot of attention, a lot of not only national but international attention on this because of the way this operates. Demand response, or you hear dial-a-ride services, are fairly inefficient services, and they're that way because of the model. You know, you can call up, make a reservation a couple days in advance. Many times you need one ride, but you're going to book 3 because you're not quite sure which one you want. And then hopefully you let those other 2 go early enough, but a lot of people have missed that opportunity. And they're just slow in the way of that delivery. So we've kind of reinvented ourselves, and basically what we're trying to do is copy the Ubers and Lyfts out there, and that's really how this service works. So it's an on-demand operation only. So there's no advance booking. You call when you're ready, and we're going to pick you up. It's a shared ride, so that doesn't mean you're going to go from point A to B and nobody else is getting on. You may go from point A to B, but we may be stopping somewhere else along the way to pick somebody going in that same direction. It's a curb-to-curb service, and those are the communities that we do serve. And the other thing that we use here is a scheduling software. So in the old days, and we did operate Dial-A-Ride a number of years ago, I had 5 reservationists. So you call up, you're making your ride, they're booking your ride, they're trying to dispatch it. Right now we have a scheduling software. I have 1 individual doing the job of 5. So we've been able to take that cost and narrow that down quite a bit. You can book your ride by phone, the old-fashioned way, and we have a lot of seniors that still like to do it that way, that they have somebody on the other end and they can book their ride. But we have over 50% are using their smartphone or their computer, and they're booking their ride that way. The service available Monday through Friday, 6:30 right now a.m. to 6:30 p.m. The cost here, and these costs are going to be changing in the fall, but right now it's $3 per adult, $2 for the kids, $1 for seniors on Mondays. And Mondays were our slow day. They are no longer a slow day for us. And then if you transfer. So it's very economical, and it's very it's used in terms of the overall usage has been continually growing to the point right now we're almost at a saturation point. This is a little bit about the service area and why I'm just showing this, that little red dot in the middle. That's one of the other reasons why we've been able to kind of keep some of these costs down. If you're going on the long haul, if you're going from a Carver or Chaska, let's say, to Eden Prairie, there's a midpoint transfer. And many of this is almost a bus-to-bus transfer. If not, you're transferred at our station. You may have like a 5-minute wait, but you're out of the elements. You're not standing in a snowbank. This way we can keep these buses moving, doing a lot more short hops, hence we get a lot more productivity out of those vehicles. Here's just some stats from May. Your average ride time, 12 minutes, wait time, 14 minutes. We provided over 6,400 rides in May. 0 denials, used 9 buses, and those are the revenue hours that we operate. Again, you can see how our ridership has grown since the beginning. This is a fairly new program, but it's continually growing, and like I say, we're almost to a saturation point now in terms of the number of vehicles that we have to the number of rides that we can give, to the point where we are in negotiations right now with both Uber and Lyft to try to see if we can work out some type of arrangement where they can come in and help augment this for us, as well as look at maybe Saturday service as well. The problem is data sharing and information sharing, and we have to make sure if we're putting any money into something, it has to be audited. We have to be able to audit, and they are very sensitive of holding their information. Okay, so why it's efficient, contracted operator wages we negotiated with our union, and these jobs really are set for more of your entry-level drivers. However, it does not have to be just an entry-level driver, but that's what we said we will pay, and the union has agreed to that. So we keep the wage rate down. Technology, again, as I mentioned, you book your rides online or so on and so forth, brings that cost down. What it used to take me 5, now it only has 1 in terms of individuals overseeing that. The on-demand, no, we don't have no-shows or cancellations anymore because you're calling when you're ready to go. So you don't lose that inefficiencies. And then that midpoint transfer. All these together brings this down to about half the cost of any other dial-a-ride service out there. More than half when you look at the county service that's offered similar here in Carver County. So that's kind of the presentation in terms of the organization and Prime. I do know there were some questions Mr. Gregory mentioned to me earlier, and I want to address those right now. The one was if Victoria was ever interested in joining, what are some of the hurdles? How does that process work? Well, that process is first controlled by the Metropolitan Council, and to be included in what's known as the Transit Taxing District, they're the ones that give that authority. And once you're inside the Transit Taxing District, what that means is you're going to pay property tax to the Met Council. It's not a huge amount, but nonetheless, it is a property tax. They take that money. That money doesn't flow back to Southwest, not directly anyway. That money is used to retire debt. Could be debt that they provide us some capital dollars to buy a new vehicle or replace a vehicle, or it could be to buy a train. I'll be just real honest. The money is controlled by them, and we have no say on that. And joining the Transit Taxing District is just that. You are paying those dollars to the Met Council. Then there's the operating funds. Up till 2001, each one of our communities paid their own way for their services because we were getting a portion of the property tax for operations. That went away in 2001. We now receive a portion of the motor vehicle sales tax. And the problem for any new systems coming in, you got the pie. The pie's already been divided up, and you bring somebody new in, that means those pie slices have to get smaller. And that's where the pushback would be from the Met Council and so forth. So just to be brutally honest here, unless there's a new funding mechanism, it's going to be a difficult struggle because there's been some other communities that have inquired about possibly joining, and that's been the pushback they've received is there's no funding. And the Met Council talks about, this session, they avoided the big cliff, as they called it. Now they're looking ahead to the next biennium, and they've already identified over $100 million deficit. So to start expanding in that period will be some of the difficulty. But that's how it is. The communities themselves don't pay for our services anymore. Once we came off the Transit Taxing District, our funding is motor vehicle sales tax revenue that we get through the Met Council from the state, fare box revenue, and Southwest is a little bit different animal than most transit organizations. We do other things in the real estate game. So we have our transit-oriented development, and we've generated revenues. We have some lease sites that we continue to generate revenues. those dollars can flow back into our system. So we don't have the peaks and valleys of some transit organizations, because if car sales go down, our money goes down. Well, this gives us that stable, resource, so we can put some dollars in from our other activities to just kind of keep a constant flow. With that, I will open it up for any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, Len. Tom, Gregory, Councilmember Gregory, you said that you had some additional questions. Were there others?
Sure, and just dovetailing a little bit on this transit tax, once you join, you really have no control over how much that tax raises and lowers, or it's pretty much up to the Met Council what they're going to bill?
That is correct. It's by formula,
Okay.
but it is totally, yes, it's the Met Council that totally controls that.
Okay, and in this new half-cent sales tax that Carver County just approved, how does that figure into your budget?
Right now, it doesn't. I mean, down the road, it could. Just across the river, in Dakota County, they are participating by putting some money into transit, but it's not a requirement. And we've had some very preliminary discussions, but there is kind of a backlog right now in Carver County, so we don't anticipate any money flowing anytime soon.
Okay, and then how about user fees? User fees versus public dollars.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work with your Prime versus your regular service?
Well, the user fee, in our world, the user fee is what you pay through the fare
Right.
box. And the Prime is more expensive than our regular, not right now it isn't, but it's going to have a little bit of a premium attached to it when we come to the fall. We're looking at that $4 versus the bus itself, the regular route bus will be $3.50. But that really is that user fee, is what you put into the fare box.
Okay, but the public subsidies, what's that ratio?
Generally, we are generating about 30% through the fare box, so it's about a 70% subsidy. And that's pretty consistent. We're a little bit better than the average here in the region, but when I say a little bit better, we're not that drastic. Metro Transit might be in that 23 to 25 range for their regular route systems.
And is your Prime service running at that same ratio?
Yeah, it is. It is. The subsidy's a little greater, again, because you don't have the masses. So the subsidy's running right around $6. So it's a little higher, but in terms of what we recover versus the expense side, it's still around that 30%.
Council?
I have a question or two. You mentioned that because of financial problems with Metropolitan Council, the ability to get approved to become part of the taxing authority is not as optimistic as it should be. I mean, does that mean nobody has gotten approved, or nobody could get approved, or I find it hard. I'm a no quitter kind of guy, but so I'm hearing this and I'm thinking we got to get away.
Yeah. I would say, again, I don't want to speak for the council. I would say nobody gets approved. I'm just saying these are some of your hurdles. There has been some. Now, they've been a few years ago. Lakeville was one that they came in. That's probably about 5 years ago now. Another one was Forest Lake. So they were able to come into this. But the situation wasn't like it is today in terms of the financial strains. Carver, for example, they got in under a grant situation. That's why they were able to put in their park and ride. They received some dollars to operate. And we have kind of worked with them to stretch that out a little bit. And they have the ability to join. Whether they join or not, they have yet to make that formal decision. But that's kind of how they were able to get on deck.
Is that a federal grant that they had? Federal?
It's a federal, but a match. There's a matching
Okay,
component. So it's a 20% match, 80% federal.
Are those grants still out there?
Yes, every 2 years that cycle comes up. That's when you can apply, and then the dollars generally flow another 2 to 3 years after that. It's called a Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, or CMAQ grant.
Okay. One further question, if you don't mind.
Yep.
So let's just put aside the fact that the Met Council's got some financial difficulties. Say that we were able to be approved to come into the taxing authority, and we would have to incorporate in our levy a small levy for this. And how much, if we took the average home value in Victoria, what is that?
I
Just roughly.
I think we thought it was $40 a year on a $350,000.
So if we have a $350,000 house, how much tax is realistically, because you said that the Met Council can do anything they want, but they in fact haven't. I mean, they haven't played around with these guys.
Right. No, they stay to the formula, and again, just those dollars, though, don't come to us for
Right.
operating. It's all just Met Council.
Right.
For operating, a lot depends on the levels of service and types of service, but if you use Carver as an example, Carver, I think we have, about a half dozen trips, express trips, and then the Prime service in Carver. It's about $100,000 a year commitment.
Total for the city.
For the city of Carver. So using that as an example. If you were to, and Carver, there's some caps on the amount of Prime that they can get, and they haven't exceeded that. But if for whatever reason you wanted more Prime, less Prime, more Express, that's something that we'd just have to sit down and work out the numbers, because we have our standard costs, and then we just apply that back.
So using $100,000 a year and number of households on the tax rolls, what's the average cost to a Victoria resident?
Do you have a good feel for that, Kelly? What a $100,000 increase to the levy?
I want to run the numbers before I venture, yes. I hate to throw a number here without.
But we can do that.
When we met, was that 6 months ago?
Yep.
Time flies.
I just quickly grabbed a property in Chanhassen that's valued at $669,000. So that is not our average, but it's the first one I grabbed. And they pay $105 annually to the Metro Transit District.
So a $669,000 house would pay $100.
So I think that 40 on a 350
300, yeah.
is pretty accurate. And then if I understand the direction, we can find out what a $100,000 city levy impact would be. The transit taxing district is levied by them. It's not something that has to be levied by the city and then passed on. It's that operating piece that you'd be responsible for.
The jewel in this whole thing is your Prime, Southwest Prime. I mean, that, on the campaign trail, door to door, that's what people ask about, is where the heck is it? You know, you don't have them at council, you don't have them. What do you have? You know, kind of,
I will tell you, it is a service that we, quite frankly, did not see coming the way it did. We set it up really for the last mile, for employment. So people are coming in on the big bus on a reverse commute and getting to those employment sites. Well, that's only a small portion of the day, and you can't hire somebody for 2 hours. So we need to keep them on the books, make 4-hour pieces of work out of it. So we said, well, let's extend this out to the public. Well, then it just exploded. So then that's why you see that graph going like it did. To the point now, about half our buses, Dave, that are the Metro Mo? Yeah. So, and people don't know this. The white buses you see out there, those were retired Metro Mobility vehicles that we brought in. We painted up, put new seats in, fixed them up. In some cases, I think we dropped some engines in them. But that's what we're using, because we could not get equipment. And even if we ordered equipment, we couldn't get it in fast enough. So this is how this program has gone, and we're now looking at all sorts of things. I mean, we're looking at believe it or not, Tesla. They manufacture a 7-passenger, and the cost is somewhere in that $80,000 range. But the dollar amount we're saving on fuel and so forth, I mean, there's a payback. So we're looking at all sorts of stuff to try to get who we can get vehicles from and how fast we can get them. That's really how fast this program. And then we're trying to figure out, all right, since our budgets aren't growing, where can we move money around? Because this is a real demand that's happening.
thank you.
One of the things that floated at our meeting with council member vote was whether the city could contract to participate only in Prime and not participate in the transit taxing district portion or have any fixed route service.
Yep.
Is that something that,
I would, again, hate to speak for the Met Council. I don't know why you could not,
Okay.
because it's really not fixed route service. And if you're not asking them for anything, I don't know why you couldn't. But that would probably be a question you need to run past them.
You said these grants are every other year. Do you know when the next grant cycle, if we wanted to apply, would be available?
Well, Dave actually sits on the advisory committee. That's why we've been so lucky to get some grant. No, that's not serious. When is it up, Dave?
Well, we just went through the advisory committee to the Transportation Advisory Board, the TAB. So you've got a lot of elected officials on the TAB, so it's an advisory board. And that's about every, I'm gonna say within the next year.
So usually they release it in the spring, like a July due date, and then they'll make awards, probably by the end of that year.
So for the sake of argument, let's assume that we applied and we were able to get a grant. How soon after that would we be able to actually get some service, some prime service out here in Victoria?
Generally, from the award, it's a minimum of 2 years. However, there are creative ways to front end that and pay yourselves back. We've done that on some of our acquisitions where we received a grant and we paid ourselves back with the grant, so we were able to accelerate that. So there are some ways. You just have to do it on the front end with the Met Council and MnDOT and TAB. They're all involved.
Thank you. Council, other questions?
Yeah, two groups of questions, I guess. The first one relating to, how do we participate? Are there prerequisites beyond the taxing authority and all that? Like, do we have to build a park and ride, that type of thing?
Again, depending on the type of service. If you're looking for express service, I would say you don't have to build a parking ride. We did provide some temporary service here years ago. We were running from the community center. Okay. The biggest problem there was it was not as identifiable, and maybe that isn't the case today as it was then. It was fairly new at that time. Churches, there's a number of transit agencies that will use churches for park and rides. So you don't necessarily. The grant allows you, and that's how Carver, they were able to access funds to actually build their station and park and ride. But it's not a requirement, no.
Thank you. And then the second area related to Prime, would WeCab be an option for partnering?
WeCab, we do partner with WeCab. WeCab, as you know, has a volunteer basis, and that's part of their struggle. They also are transporting. Ours are pretty much, you have to be somewhat independent. You can navigate the system by yourself or have somebody with you, where WeCab does a lot of that for the individual. So it's kind of two separate services. But we do work with WeCab very closely. They will send people our way that they feel can navigate by themselves. And if they have a financial hardship, we work with them on that.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions?
One additional, Mr. Mayor. If I recall our previous conversation months ago, it seems to me that if we go this route, if we could somehow get into the taxing authority, that there are peripheral benefits that wouldn't be available to us. For instance, if you're in the taxing authority and there's opportunities for park and rides, other parking facilities, which have grants associated with them, you would be in line for some of this a lot easier than sitting, like Victoria has talked for years about, wouldn't it be nice if we had a central parking lot and maybe a ramp and connected that up with the bus system. But that's all pie in the sky, except if you get into the taxing authority. Then am I understanding this correctly?
I think it opens up some options for you. The biggest thing, I'm going to use Carver as an example again. So Carver was able to receive this federal grant, but 20% is being paid for by the city of Carver. In our case, when I built Southwest Station, I received 80% of the funding through the federal government. 20% was actually funded by the Met Council because we were in the transit taxing district, and they used those dollars to match it. So there's the advantage where they'll use their buying power in a sense where the city doesn't have to come up with the cash. So that's kind of the biggest difference. The other, it doesn't, I won't say automatically put you to the front of the pack, but if you're within the transit taxing district, that's already, in a sense, the need has already been established, because otherwise they're not going to let you in if they didn't think there was the growth coming or the need for those type of services. So I think that would help you, but it's not a guarantee.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. One follow-up question on the grant with Carver. I understand that they're not part of the taxing district. That gave them operating funds for a certain amount of time. Can you tell us how long that is? Is it?
Yeah, initially it was a two-year cycle, but what we've been able to do with Carver, we've been able to pare back the services really to meet the services that they need. They had a lot more services than when they put in their grant than they really needed. So we pared that back. We also got creative on what the charge was, because I'm looking at it as a tail. So I have to start my vehicles a little bit earlier and end them a little later. And then there's some mileage. But the cost is a lot less than if you went from Carver to downtown. So we're only charging them from Carver to Chaska. And so by doing it that way, it doesn't cost us much more. They get the value of that benefit, and they've been able to extend that grant. So we are now in year 3, and there's probably another good year to 2 left now by stretching it out the way we have.
Got it. My assumption would be if something could be arranged, the prime service would go to the station you already have on 212, not the one next to the Chanhassen Dinner Theater, but the other one. I can't remember which one that one's called. But is that how you would envision this if Victoria
Depends.
came up with it?
You know, if let's say a resident was taking the prime from Victoria to Chanhassen, let's say it's up by the dinner theater or wherever, there wouldn't be a transfer involved. They would go from point A to B. Mm-hmm. And there might be a pickup along the way. If they were going to Eden Prairie, then they would transfer, but it's the one at 212 and 101, because that's where the Eden Prairie buses come in, drop for anybody going west, and vice versa. So, but if they are staying in that zonal boundary, so it would be, in this case, Carver, Chaska, Chanhassen, Victoria, there's no transfer required.
Got it. Thank you. Council, other questions?
Yes, please. We tried I'll call it an experiment with Southwest Metro several years ago, was it? That wasn't really successful. I don't think it was Prime.
No, it was Express.
Express. And
was
so can you
Express.
help us understand why, from your perspective, that wasn't successful, and does that have any bearing on Prime?
I think a couple reasons, because I was here then. And one was we didn't have Southwest Station at the time, or excuse me, we didn't have East Creek Station. So we were running basically out of Target. So it was that same scenario like we have with Carver today, where we just go right down 212. So it was easy coming from here over to Target and then on. And so once that new station, that quick link was gone. It was a little bit longer travel pattern. So there was added cost. And we weren't charging anything. This was more of a demonstration that we were trying. And partially we tried it because we were running out of room at Target under our agreement with Target, and we were trying to put people wherever we could until we could get the new station built. So part of it was that came into play, so the cost associated with the service. The other was the location. It was a great location. You know, we could get buses in and out. There was parking available. It was just off the main corridor. So a lot of people, especially if you're traveling, let's say from Waconia or whatever, didn't see it. And in our business, they got to see it. They once they see it, they'll say, I'm going to check that out. I'm going to give it a try for my commute trip. So that's part of it. The other thing that we find is as you go west, the number of people that actually go downtown, work downtown, diminishes. And it really diminishes rapidly after we leave Eden Prairie. So it's just the sheer numbers. You don't have as many people as you go west going all the way to downtown as you do like from Eden Prairie.
Well, and that's really, I think, where I was headed is that, this sounds very interesting, but with your expertise and experience running the operation you have now, do we have enough demand here to justify this?
You know, I think in terms of the tail piece of it, because it's very inexpensive, and your community is still growing. But I do believe, you know, and downtown works for us because we have advantages. You know, we can get you there faster because we use shoulders, we use the HOV lane, and then you have a parking cost on the other end that continually is climbing. So it makes sense. If you're not going all the way to downtown, it's hard for a work commute for a bus to compete. You know, people always say, why aren't you going up and down 494? Well, again, we can't get you there any faster. You're not paying for parking on the other end, and everybody has a car out here. So I can run these buses. I have run those buses, but they just are not very productive.
How does the prospect of light rail coming to Eden Prairie affect your operation?
You know, it will have some effect. We don't see a major effect in terms of we're going to be faster. I mean, because there's 17 stops on that train. So we will still be faster as long as we have those advantages. And we've surveyed our people, and they say they're staying with us. I really think we can take advantage of it. I mean, there's some midday service that we provide today. It's there because if you take the peak hour service, but you may need to get home or feel the need that you might have to get home, having that midday is useful, and creating those work paces are useful. Well, right now, if I can rely on that train midday, or I can rely on that train on the night, and then we do more short hop stuff, I can take that money that we were spending on that long and reinvest it into more local type services like Prime. So I don't think it's going to hurt us much.
Thank you.
Okay, council, do we want to provide any direction to staff? All right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry for the delay. I would, as one person on the city council, I would like not to see this ball drop, because I see such a good opportunity for, with the Prime, Southwest Prime, and the growth that we see in the next few years, and the the makeup of Victoria. So I don't know what to say in terms of keeping the ball in the air, but that's what I would propose, is that we somehow keep the ball in the air.
So, in my mind, keeping the ball in the air, the first thing I'd like to understand would be a more detailed survey of citizens. Is this of interest? Try to assess demand.
I would agree. I'd kind of like to see, keep our finger on the ball as far as grants. And before we did anything regarding taxes, if we were able to get a grant, use that to kind of measure demand and see if it's viable. And then if it is, then we can look at additional options. So I think informally, I'd like to see if the council would like to have the staff look and maybe bring something back to the council in terms of how we would go about getting those grants, applying for it, and at the same time look at other options as far as, Len, based on what you said, given the timelines that would be required, if there's some way, options in which we could find a way to fund this and then repay ourselves through the grant. So I'd like to see if we can get the staff to look at some of that and then come back to the council with a report.
May I offer a
Please do.
my only concern, I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, but my only concern is that I don't know what the effort is to do that, and if it takes away from many other projects, I would want to understand that before we divert them to a new subject.
I have no objection with that. Lori, would you take a look at that and get back to us?
I'd be happy to.
All right.
And if I can, we can assist. We've done many of these. One thing I want to be clear, I don't want to mislead you, but the grant, the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Grant, really isn't set up for services like Prime. It's set up for those commutes, because again, it's air quality improvement. So you're taking people off the congested corridors, the highway corridors. So those type of grants. There are different grants that might be available for Prime type service and only Prime type service, but the one I was talking about that Carver got was really a congestion grant. But we can assist Lori on that, and we can kind of put together some budgetary figures, so you have something at least to work with a little more solid.
All right, thank you. Council, any other comments, questions?
Just a comment, I'm no expert on bus service, but the few times that I have used Southwest, I've just been incredibly impressed. It's just a first-class organization. I want to congratulate you on that.
I appreciate that.
Hear, hear. All right, at this point, Len, Dave, thank you very much for coming and speaking to the council tonight. We'll go ahead and close the workshop, and we'll start the council meeting in roughly 20 minutes.
Thank you
Thanks.
much.
Thank you.
With me copies of the petition signatures I've received so far to share with you and the other citizens asking that the appeal be dropped, to accept Judge Kane's ruling and end the discontent in our beloved city. That all parties concerned set their differences aside, work together to resolve their conflicts, and move forward for the good of our city once and for all. I currently have 240 signatures, and as promised, we'll keep the petition open while the lawsuit continues. I also wanted to say I have lived here 16 years. In those 16 years, I found that this community especially will go above and beyond whatever it takes to help someone in need. They are generous, giving, loving people. I've witnessed these selfless acts of kindness time and time again and marvel at their compassion. That's why I love Victoria and the people of this community. That's why I chose to live here. I also found that they really don't like conflict and shy away from it like the plague. So I hope you and the other citizens don't take these signatures lightly. It was very brave of those that signed the petition to step forward and speak out. I hope to get more signatures for you after speaking tonight. Many are still struggling with their decision to sign. And admittedly, you will find about a dozen people didn't sign their last name on the petition. It's truly sad that there are those in our community, for whatever reason, fear repercussions for speaking out, but they do. My hope is that you and the other citizens keep that in mind, soften your hearts, and reconsider the course of action you are pursuing. Please stop the litigation. If for no other reason, do it for us, the people of Victoria. We truly want peace. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd give that to Lori.
Yes, I will.
Next speaker, Kelly Hallis. Did I say that right? Please state your name and your address for the record. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Hallis, and I live at 5760 Marsh Lake Road. And I'm here tonight because I would like to thank our city engineer, our director of development, our city council, our city manager, and our mayor for your continued willingness to talk to the residents and stakeholders abutting Marsh Lake Road and helping us work through some of the situations that we've been having. We are here tonight because we know on the consent agenda there is a resolution to implement a speed management program on Marsh Lake Road, and we would like to let you all know that we support that, and we really, again, thank you very much for continuing to work with us toward this resolution.
Thank you. Just for the record, did you want that pulled off and have the council discussion? Okay. That's the only slips I have. Is there anybody else that would like to address the council? Okay. Next item is the consent agenda. The council.
I'd like to pull item H, please.
Item H. Okay, council, anything else that should be pulled off?
Is the temporary speed limit part of the claims roster?
It is, item C.
I don't want to pull it off. I just wanted to get a comment on the record that it is a temporary measure, that it, as soon as the road is completed, that speed measure will disappear and the road will take the county will take the road over. So just so there's no misunderstanding, I just want to get that on the record.
If I may, and
Go ahead.
again, don't want to pull the item, but I did want to also just draw attention and make sure that we give adequate public notice that this change, assuming it's approved, is being put in place, so everybody's fully aware and knows. Patrolling is going to be, enforcement is going to, they can't be there 24 hours a day, and so the more that we can get the word out to people that the speed limit is dropped and new expectations are in place, I think the better off we are.
There are these wonderful little signs at Home Depot, about $12, that say "slow down."
I think that's kind of sold now.
Okay, at this point, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with item H removed, which we'll pick up after this?
I'll make a motion, we approve the consent agenda, less item H.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, it passes. We'll now pick up item H. Councilmember Crowley.
Just general questions. I was a recipient of one of these notices from Carver County stating exactly what this item identifies, that some residents of Victoria will have the taxing jurisdiction switched between Minnehaha Creek Watershed District and the Carver County Water Management Organization, which means a change in how we will be taxed. I spent about 40 minutes trying to figure out what that means in terms of a monetary change, and I couldn't find a thing. So is there anything any direction that you can provide, or maybe research that you can provide to figure out, is the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District more expensive than Carver, less expensive? What does it mean?
I believe the impact on each property is going to vary, but I would ask the city engineer if she could provide a little more insight into that.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, I don't have the dollar amounts handy. That's certainly information we can get to you, but generally the Carver County WMO is less expensive than Minnehaha Creek Watershed District in terms of what the amounts are. You don't happen to know them, Kelly, do you?
I believe we could go to the Carver County website and look at the taxing rates. But
Microphone,
it might be
please.
easier to-
Thank you.
I'm sorry. We probably could go to the Carver County tax website and look at those rates, but it might be easier for me to just look those up and send out an update to the council at a later date.
Yeah, and the county can provide that information for us too. But generally, Carver County WMO is less than Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, and the vast majority of the parcels in Victoria are switching to Carver County WMO.
So that was really my second final question, is what's the general geography of this switch?
There's a map that isn't there that Ben was going to load for me quick. But generally, it's on the fringes. So some parcels in your neighborhood that actually drain to Carver WMO are moving to Carver WMO. There's some portions of Cheval that are switching north of 86th Street, but just like the south half of the Woodlands, or not the Woodlands, Greenway on the Park.
So in general, if you drain to Bavaria, it's going to go to Carver. If you
Correct.
drain to Wasserman, it's going to stay.
Minnehaha Creek.
Okay.
Yep,
Thank you.
Is there any impact to the city, or is it strictly to the property owners?
just the property owners.
Thank you.
I will make a motion to approve resolution supporting change in boundary between Carver County Watershed Management Organization, Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, and the Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District.
Is there a second?
Second motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, passes. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the public hearing. Lori, correct me if I'm wrong here. If you want to introduce this, and then we'll go through and make sure we do the public hearing right.
Sounds good. I'll just give a brief staff report. Tonight we do have a public hearing for an ordinance amending Chapter 4 of the Victoria City Code regarding alcoholic beverages. The council has talked about these issues at several meetings prior. There are a number of changes that would occur as a result of this ordinance amendment. Some of them are as a result of the 2017 legislative session. As you know, they are the legislature provided for Sunday off sales, basically Sunday sales. That issue is known as liquor stores would be able to be open and sell on Sundays. We also talked about some changes that we wanted to make as a city to both reflect our current practices and just to clean things up a little bit. And so just running through the changes briefly, Section 4.1 is proposed to be modified. That is our language regarding open bottle and consumption in parks. Currently, the intent of our ordinance, which was modified in 2014, is to allow the consumption of beer and wine within our city parks. But the language that was adopted at that time has not been entirely clear to our law enforcement folks. And so working with our city attorney, we've cleaned up that language a little bit, but not changed the intent. Section 426 I've already referenced is the Sunday off sales. Section 4-61 is an old provision that eliminates a requirement for 50% of income to come from food sales in order for an establishment to have outdoor seating. That's not been the practice of the city of Victoria over the last 10 years. Section 465, 466, and 4111 would provide for community event permits. This is the language that we talked about in reference to allowing open containers within the specified area of downtown in conjunction with events like Classic Car. Volksfest would continue to be governed under a temporary liquor license, but this would give us a framework for Classic Car and future events.
Lori, let me interrupt you for a second. Can we get the presentation move forward so that we're on the same page with you?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor. I'm just looking at the staff report. Is that what you'd like to have on the screen?
Yeah, because it didn't line up with what you were speaking about.
Sounds good. Yeah, in the presentation, I just have the motions. There, that's the one. Oh,
It's not coming up.
All right, well, let's proceed.
okay. There's just two more. Section 4-181 is just a modification to our application requirement, eliminating information that's already required to be provided to the state. That's going to help us on the admin end and just be a little more business friendly. And Section 4-183 it deals with 3.2 malt liquor. It's duplicative of language that's in state statute, and as you know from previous cleanups we've done, we've been trying to eliminate duplicative provisions in our city code so that we don't have to go through so much trouble when the state makes updates to their provisions. So we would be looking to hold a public hearing this evening. Notice of this was published in the May 25th edition of the Chanhassen Villager. We would be looking to take public comment, and then the council could entertain a motion if they so choose.
Thank you, Lori. At this point, I'm going to open up the public hearing to amend the ordinance. Is there anybody that would like to address the council? One more time, is there anybody that would like to address the council? Seeing none, can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move we approve an ordinance, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I move we close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Public hearing is now closed. At this point, unless the council wishes to discuss, can I have a motion to approve the ordinance change?
Now I will approve an ordinance amending Chapter 4. I will move, we approve, I can't get this right, an ordinance amending Chapter 4 and Chapter 18 of the Victoria City Code regarding alcoholic beverages.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. At this point, can I have a motion authorizing the summary publication?
I'll make a motion, we approve the resolution authorizing a summary publication of ordinance number 416.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Sorry.
Second the motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The summary publication is also approved unanimously. Okay, next item, new business. Kelly, would you introduce the next topic, please?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have Andy Berg from Abdo Eck and Myers. He's here to give the results of the 2016 audit. He'll be going over the management letter. You have the paper copies of that in front of you, as well as the full comprehensive annual financial report. We will shortly be putting the online version of those on the website after tonight as well for any citizens that are interested in looking at those. So with that, I will turn that over to Andy. Is the remote up there for you? Okay.
All
Are you good to go?
Any particular way to point it?
Thank you,
Right,
Kelly.
Kelly.
For the record, could you please state your name and your position?
Yep. I'm Andy Berg with Abdo Eck and Myers, audit partner that was on the 2016 audit. Thanks, Kelly, for the introduction. We did go over this at the May 17th finance meeting last month. What I'm going to go over tonight is a summary of the management letter. I have it in a presentation form. You also have the hard copies in there, so you can follow along too. The end result is that we issue an opinion on your financial statements. We issued a unmodified or clean opinion, so the best opinion you can get. We had no findings associated with audit. As part of the audit, we also issue a report on Minnesota legal compliance. There's 7 different areas the state auditor has us look at, so completely clean audit.
One item to point out, you did apply for a certificate for your 2015 audit, so just wanted to congratulate the city there on financial reporting. I do anticipate you're going to submit the 2016 financial statements for that same award and anticipate that you'll receive that again. So congratulations to your finance staff. This is the second year of a pension-related accounting standard. Last year when I was up here was the first year that was implemented. It's more of a year-end accounting type entry. It doesn't really affect your cash flow. Your pension expense is still based on the statutory contribution rates for the employer and the employee. But I think it's important to know you do participate in two pension plans. The first one's your fire relief single employer pension plan, and on your government-wide financial statements, there's a pension asset at the end of the year recognized at about $167,000. The other pension plan you participate in is a multi-employer state plan, so that your payer plan, and there's a net pension liability. So all employers in the state, counties, cities, schools, other organizations recognize their proportionate share based on contributions. The city of Victoria's share is about a 1.7 net pension liability that's recognized on your government-wide financial statements. Now, if we dig into more of the fund information that you typically see more often, starting on page 5 of the management letter. Here's a 5-year history of your ending general fund unassigned fund balance. The city has a policy to maintain that at a minimum of 30% at the end of the year, as you can see by the blue line there. Most years it's at that 30% or very close. How we come up with that number is comparing the unassigned fund balance to your next year's budget, so the red line. Looking at the trend in the budget, you'll see that has increased, each of the 5 years presented, but the city has been able to maintain that 30% ending fund balance. Now, if we look at how you got to that ending fund balance, which is on page 4 of the management letter, so a page back, we give you a summary comparison of final budget amounts to actual. Both revenue and expenditures came in fairly close to the budget. Revenues were about $231,000 higher. Total revenues just over $4.4 million. The largest variance there was licenses and permits higher than budget. Total expenditures at about $3.5 million, budgeted about $3.7 million. So total revenues over expenditures of $974,000. You did transfer out $675,000 to other funds. You originally budgeted for $527,000. You had some additional funds to transfer out that the council approved at the end of the year. So total increase in total fund balance of $299,000, ending at $1.87 million. In addition to the unassigned fund balance, the city does have over $600,000 assigned for specific purposes and also has some committed for revenue stabilization. Now, if we look at your revenues over a 3-year period on page 6 of the management letter, here we give you a graphical presentation of the revenues by source. Looking at the blue bar there, that's your property taxes. You can see that makes up about 73% of your total revenue. That's the importance of maintaining that ending fund balance. Your tax revenue comes in about halfway through the year, so at the beginning of the year, you need a fund balance to meet your expenditure needs the first part of the year. Other revenue sources there are the other bars. The one to point out is your licenses and permits, a red bar. That did increase from 2015 to 2016. The item I pointed out that had the largest revenue budget variance. The next page, on page 7, is similar graph, your expenditures and transfers over a 3-year period by program. The blue bar there is the general government. That makes up about 30% of your total expenditures and transfers out. You can see that number has been increasing some over the last 3 years. Total expenses about $1.26 million. The next highest is the public safety at about 21%, the red bar. So you can see that increase from 2015 to 2016. Prior to 2016, the public works, the green bar, was the second highest spending. Expenditures there decreased from 2015 to 2016. Now moving on to some of the other city funds. On the top of page 8, we list your 4 special revenue funds. Total fund balance of just over 1.1 million, increase of about 104,000, with the largest fund being your Victoria Recreation Center that increased about 88,000 due to actual coming in better than budget. So you had a total increase there of that 88,000. The next set of funds are your debt service funds on page 9. So in the presentation, I give you a summary of all the funds. In total, with those funds, you have about 12.6 million of total assets, which about 7.1 make up cash to pay your future debt. Total debt outstanding that's going to be paid with city sources is about 22.6 million. You have additional debt on the books of about 8 million that is related to refunding bonds, that there's escrow set up to pay that debt. If you didn't refund any more of the bonds over the life of those bonds, you'd pay about 2.8 million of interest. We also give you at the bottom a chart of 10 years of the next principal and interest payments, so your debt service requirements. The principal being the blue, the red being the interest. So you can see as you pay down and some of those bonds mature, the debt service requirement does reduce. So assuming you didn't issue any other debt. The next set of funds is on page 10. So your capital project funds. These are funds that are more the one-time projects, and you plan and utilize factor into your CIP plan and your long-term planning. In total, there's about 6.3 million of ending fund balance here, increase of about 1.5 million. A number of different projects going on during the year. It accounts for a lot of the activity in these funds. One other item to point out too is that a number of these funds are restricted from external resources. So the ending 6.3 million is a combination of restricted resources such as your TIP districts, unspent bond proceeds for projects, and then the remaining is unassigned fund balance internally assigned by the city. The next set of funds are your enterprise funds. With these funds, we give you a cash flow analysis, ending cash balance at the end of the year too. So starting with the water fund here, looking at the top graph on page 11, your cash flows from operations. You can see the fund generated cash flows from operations, the difference between the blue bar, the receipts, and the gray, the disbursement. You add in the debt service payments, the principal and interest, the green. All that cash flow from operation has been used, but the fund does have significant connection fees to help cover the cash flow there. Total ending cash balance about 1.7 million. You can see that decrease from 2014 down to 2015 and then increase some in 2016. There is a minimum target balance there with a goal set internally for cash flow purposes. So you can see the cash balance is above that with some cash reserves for future projects. The water fund does have debt outstanding, and you can see by the graph on the bottom of page 11, as you've been paying down, that total debt has been decreasing right about around 5 million at the end of the year. Now the next fund is your sewer fund on page 12. Here looking at the cash flow graph at the top of page 12 there, you can see that there has been cash generated from operations in 2016. The difference between the blue bar and the gray bar. In 2015, you didn't generate any cash. You had cash used from operations. This fund also has connection fees like the water fund, the purple portion of the bar and the receipts column. Here, looking at the cash flow, the total cash balance is below the internal target, minimum target there, and has been decreasing each of the years presented, and then at 502,000. The main reason that decreased in 2016 is due to capital projects during the year. The next fund is your stormwater fund. Here looking at the cash generated from operations at the top there, you can see that the disbursements has been higher, so it's a use of cash each of the last 2 years, 2015 and 2016. The disbursements did increase from 2014 up to 2015 and remained fairly consistent in 2016. So with that use of cash, you can see that the cash balance has decreased each of the last 3 years. In 2014, it was at about 472,000, down to about 350,000 in 2016. So with all the enterprise funds, we do recommend the city continue to look at the rates to make sure you're going to cover your operations, debt service, and future capital projects. So the last item I'm going to cover is kind of a ratio analysis and looking at over trends. So I'm going to skip to page 16 and look at 3 of the ratios that the city kind of picked out as key performance indicators. The first one there is the debt per capita. So the City of Victoria lines are the black line and the purple line here. We do give you a peer group comparison of 2 different populations. So cities of population 2,500 to 10,000, which is the red bar, and then cities of population 10 to 20,000. So in this graph, the black line's your total debt per capita, which includes all the refunding bonds. We do kind of like when we were looking at the debt service funds, exclude the ones that are going to be paid by escrow. So I think a better representation is looking at the purple line with the diamond there. So you can see from 2013 to 2015, that was decreasing, and with the debt that was issued in 2016, that number went up a little bit. And then taxes per capita. Here you can see the line did decrease, the black line, from 2013 to 2015, with an increase in 2016. With this number, this is just, again, one number, tax per capita. There's a lot of other, with any of these ratios that you want to pay attention to. The makeup of the city, can affect that. Cities with a higher commercial business, they pay taxes but aren't included in that taxes per capita. So we do recommend, not only looking at just one of these, but a combination of them and what makes up the city as a whole. And then the last one, the governmental current expenditures per capita. There you can see that's been real consistent over the last 4 years, pretty even from 2013 to 2016 and below both peer group comparisons. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions on the management letter or the actual financial statements.
Council?
Andy, would you say the difference, if you go back to the last 2 charts? So that one and that one and the last one. So we are above taxes per capita, but we're below expenditures. Is that due to other cities having more commercial property? Did I hear you say that correctly?
That could be one of the contributing factors. There's probably a number of things that can factor into that, and then you look at the expenditures per capita. You contract your police services out. Some cities, may have a police department where they're contracting out to others, which is going to raise their public safety expenditures higher too. So there's, a number of factors like that. That's just one example that may factor in.
I think another contributing factor is that we do not get any local government aid, and a number of cities do, which could be another factor in that.
Yep. So that's a good point on the taxes per capita. So, a lot of depending on which city it is, some receive no LGA, some receive, their percent, your taxes as a percent of revenue is like 70-some percent, where some cities may be down to 50%, some may be up to 90%, where they're having other revenue sources.
Okay, Council, any other questions?
Did our tax capacity increase in 2016?
Not in 2016.
Okay. So that's not the reason for taxes per capita going up.
Is there a preference, or what is the preference for using debt per capita versus debt as a percent of market value or as tax capacity?
I think you could look at either of them. I know you guys have a debt management plan too that you look at a couple different items in there too. I think it's taking a look, not looking at just one of them, but factoring all of them is going to give you the best information too.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Just one for Kelly. Our sewer fund balance is going in the opposite direction for the last few years. Could you just comment on that and what are we doing to correct that?
A couple of things. We've been slowly increasing rates. We've been doing a 2% rate increase each year. So with that, and then also with the rate decrease we were able to get from the Met Council, we believe that we'll be able to gradually increase the fund balance we have in the sewer fund so that we can get that balance up to where it should be. So we're comfortable in the direction it's starting to go now.
Okay.
So Kelly, with respect to the fund balances in really all three of these, I think those were relatively new. Didn't we just establish targets for those within the last maybe 5 to 7 years? And specifically on the stormwater fund, I mean, we're quite a bit ahead of our target, but I'm a little surprised to see that the target is declining because that's been such a topic of conversation and such an area of uncertainty with respect to what does long-term maintenance of stormwater ponds require, and knowing that it could be a big number. I mean, I think we're planning appropriately, but maybe the target needs to be reviewed and make that more formal.
Yes, the target we have established for the stormwater management really just kind of reflects our current operating expenses and any planned capital outlay and some depreciation. We haven't really established any formal plans for dredging or any long-term potential liabilities. So that might be something for the Finance Committee to look at, establishing a something for a better minimum target balance for that fund.
Yeah, so that minimum target, it just includes the next year's capital, if there is any. It doesn't look out further than that, and that's where I think your question's good. And I think the city, for many of its activities, looks out over a 5 to 10 or even longer period in some of the capital projects planning for those.
Yeah, exactly. We've recognized that there is a number of different authorities that are looking at how to manage stormwater, and we see a potential landmine out there, and we don't want to be surprised by it. So we put the money away, but I think, again, formalizing what's the right target would be appropriate.
Yeah, we can certainly take a look at that.
Okay. At this point, can I have a motion to accept the annual financial report?
I'll make a motion to accept the annual financial report as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, just a real quick point of order. In the last council meeting, I talked about so that we don't accidentally step on each other when I'm moving the floor around. Please wait until I recognize you to make comments, and then when you're done, please let me know so that I can easily pass the floor to each of the speakers as we get into these additional topics. With that, Lori, will you introduce the next item, please?
I will. Thank you, Mayor. Tonight we have members of the Victoria Alliance here to talk to us again about Alliance Park Shelter Project. And I'm going to give a little bit of background that the mayor had asked for beforehand, and then Laura O'Neill, who I believe now is the former president of the Victoria Alliance.
End of the month.
End of the month, okay. Is going to give you the presentation and respond to specific questions. But for those that may be just coming to this Lions Park project and not have some background, I'll give you just the high-level overview. The Victoria Alliance formerly met at Old City Hall in the community room, and when that facility was demolished, they moved to St. Victoria. But the city and the Alliance have been talking all along the way about what might be a solution for a permanent home for the Lions. And you'll recall that we went through a couple of discussions and iterations of a standalone facility. And where we are now, and we've been looking at over the last year or so, is improvements that could be made to the shelter at Lions Park that would allow that facility to be used on a 3 seasons, 4 seasons basis and be more of a permanent home for the Lions. And what you'll be hearing tonight would be a proposal for a way for the city and the Lions to partner on completing those improvements, which are totaled at about $300,000. Some of you may not know that the Victoria Lions actually purchased most of the property that is Lions Park. It is owned by the city, but was donated by the Lions. And the Lions built the park shelter that is there today in 1979. So I'll be happy to take questions afterwards, but I know Laura has a presentation also.
Thank you, Lori. Laura, would you please state your name and position for the record?
Yeah, I'm Laura O'Neill. I'm the current president of the Victoria Lions for about 2 more weeks. Then it turns over to Matt Bergman. With me tonight, I've got Al Orson, who's our treasurer back there, and Dave Lura, who will be our first vice president next year. This past year, we just celebrated our 50th anniversary as a Lions Club. We're pretty proud of that. In over 50 years, we've donated over $1 million of land and improvements and structures to the city of Victoria. And we're working on our next project, which is going to serve a couple of purposes. One will help us have a home that's not the St. Victoria Church. We don't want to overstay our welcome there, but also we are looking for something to contribute to the citizens of Victoria, give them a place to meet, to have graduation parties, family gatherings, that kind of thing. So you can see in this drawing here, which Al did, basically our general concept ideas of what we want to do. We want to take the existing Lions Park shelter and do a big major overhaul and improvement on it. When we originally started this project, we estimated it at being about $200,000. And as we went along further into the process, we realized there were a lot of costs that we didn't anticipate. What we're asking the City Council tonight is to consider helping us out with some of those costs. Specifically, you can see in your agenda thing here, $43,270 is what we're estimating the cost to be. And basically what we're looking at
Excuse me for just a second. For the record, isn't that in the staff report?
That is the staff report.
Staff report.
I'm sorry. That's all right. Please continue.
All the permit fees, including the Met Council fees and city SAC and WAC charges. The most significant fee that we can anticipate is a Xcel Energy required electrical upgrade up at the pavilion, the current pavilion. We're not sure exactly how much that's going to be. We've heard estimates all over the board. This $43,270 number assumes the top end of that, so it could come in less. It's just impossible to tell at this point. And then re-roofing the building, which my understanding is that the city had already anticipated that as an expense. What we are looking to do is basically, as you can see in this picture, enclose the current structure so that it becomes more of a 3-season, hopefully 4-season use. Ultimately, someday we'd like to put a full kitchen in there. That's not in the budget yet for us, considering this is going to cost about $300,000. But that would be kind of like a phase 2, and then it would be a year-round use building. There's a ton of work that's gone into this, and the club has voted that we are prepared to go ahead with the current financial state of the club. We just can't afford to do the whole thing. So we're asking the city to contribute $43,000 of this project to get us started. Basically, a lot of the startup costs, specifically the electrical upgrade. And I don't know how to work this thing, Lori. There we go. Here's a list of some other things that we've looked at for the proposal. What it's going to cost, the demolition, all that stuff. We'd like to get started as soon as possible. Obviously, you guys are well aware that building costs go up all the time, and so we'd like to begin sooner than later. Our softball tournament, which you just voted for our liquor permit, thank you for that, will be done mid-July, and we'd like to be able to start construction as soon as possible after that. Any questions?
No, please continue.
That's all I've got, really. We're looking for you guys to help us out with this.
All right, thank you. One of the things I saw in the staff report, if I remember correctly, was there's some demo work that you also, I think the staff report said that you wanted the city to pay, and that the plan was the Lions Club would reimburse the city for those costs at a later time. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, immediately after. Most of our funding is coming from our charitable gaming account, and so in order to spend that money legally, we need to spend it with allowable organizations, which the city of Victoria is. So we were hoping that you guys could take on some of those first couple of things that we would pay any other general contractor to do, like the demolition, and we would pay you to do that, reimburse you your cost of it.
Got it, thank you. Council members? Councilmember Striegel, go ahead.
I had a couple questions. The schedule, is there any rec sports? This is probably as much a question for Ann or the Park and Rec Department. Is there any rec sports conflicts in terms of construction that would be going on that would take facilities out of play?
The only thing that I would want to check into is our rentals, reservations at the shelter itself. In the fall, usually we just go with flag football that is utilizing those fields, so that wouldn't necessarily be an interruption.
Will the fields all be available during the construction?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then with respect to the re-roofing, was that, is that a planned expense that we have budgeted?
It was, yep, a year ago.
Can you roughly speak to the amount?
I think that we had put away about $10,000, originally identified $10,000 in the CIP back in 16. And when the Lions Club presented this, we just pulled that back out.
So that would kind of be netted against this, so really it's more like 33 we're talking?
We had eliminated the item from the CIP, not knowing what was going to be going on with the project. So I think the 43 is the best representation of what we would contribute.
Okay. And then my last question is with respect to the $43,270. Is that actual expense, or is some of that city-related permits and fees that we essentially can absorb or waive?
That's correct, Councilman Striegel. Some of that would be money paid to the city, including any portion of building permits, plan review fees, or whack and sack charges. It's also an estimate. I know 43,270 sounds like a very specific number. The estimate on the work from Excel is anywhere from 3,000 to 25,000, so it's actually quite a broad range at this point.
Other council members?
Mr. Mayor, where is the funding right now as far as budgets or our plan? Where are these dollars? Where are they coming from? We talked about the roof, but anything else? The Excel charges, they were $25,000. Where are we going to get them?
Yeah, we had, if I may, we had budgeted $100,000 this year in the CIP for the replacement of ball field fencing at Lions Park.
Oh, yes.
That CIP item came in significantly under at just over $55,000, and so the CIP funds from that line item, about $44,000, could be reallocated for these costs. As Councilmember Striegel noted, some of them would not actually need to be cash costs. You know, we wouldn't have to pay ourselves for the building permit. But that would be our proposal for funding this if you choose to go forward.
Council members, other?
Just to be clear, the whack and sack, we would actually have to write that check, though.
We would for the Met Council portion, and certainly the council could say otherwise, but we'd probably want to just talk about whether we wanted to pay our own whack and sack fee. We probably would not write a check for the building permit. We would just consider that more of a waiving. Mm-hmm. We may want to contribute to our water and sewer fund, but we could talk about that.
What's the percentage that would go to the Met Council on that?
The Met Council portion of the fee is it's about 50% of the total. We don't have a determination, so we are currently estimating that it would be 2 whack and sack units.
At about 5,000 each.
Like 5 grand.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other Councilmember Striegel?
So, in general, I want to just thank the Lions for being such a great part of the community for so many years. And I mean, that park and how it's grown and developed over the years is just a great testament to the partnership and the commitment to the community. So I want to thank you for that. And, you know, as a general statement, you know, the action is to give you feedback. So I think, you know, from my perspective, this would be a really nice upgrade in addition to the area. Obviously, we need to talk to the neighbors and make sure that it fits within the overall community expectations. But, you know, that shelter as it is has served us well, but I think it's in need of a little help. Yeah, and so I think this is a great way to kill a couple of birds with one stone. And I am curious about two pieces of it. One is, would there be a permanent liquor license request? Because I think that's always that goes along sometimes with the Lions events. So would that be permanent? Or would that be event by event?
I think what we anticipate is just keeping the liquor license the same as it is now. Okay. We have 2 events currently that we use the liquor license for. One is our spring fling, which we have every spring, and then one is the softball tournament. I think that our liquor license, my understanding from our last secretary, is that we can use it up to 8 times a year. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but we never come close to using the whole liquor license, so I don't see any reason to have a permanent one.
Okay, great. And then you mentioned shelter rental or park rental. Does this change or improve the rentability and maybe the demand for a rental space? Does it have the potential for creating some revenue? And if so, is that Lions revenue, city revenue? How does that work?
We absolutely anticipate donating the completed building to the city when it's done. So it would not be Lions rental income.
So is that...
Yeah, and I would anticipate that we would be able to have quite a few more rental opportunities with the building improved.
Nice facility. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done.
Council, thank you. I don't want you to misinterpret this statement. There's probably a lot of people in Victoria that are new to the area with our recent growth. They may not know all of the things the Lions have done, and I agree with Councilmember Striegel's comments about what you've contributed to the community. Would you mind taking a few minutes and just providing, if you will, the newer residents some of the things that you've done and the reason why taxpayer support of this is under consideration?
Well, we just ended our year as Lions with 110 members, most of whom are Victoria residents. Some of whom, 2 of them actually, are charter members. They've been members of the club for the 50 years, which is amazing. And the bigger projects that we've done over the years is the land that is actually known as Lions Park was donated by the Lions to the city. I'm not sure on the acreage. I apologize for that. I have no idea. They built, actually back then in those days, they actually hand-built that structure that's known as the Lions Park Shelter currently. We also built the old Lions Hall, which was butted up adjacent to the old City Hall, and finished that off. There's all kinds of things that we've built over the years. Most significantly is probably Lions Park, though.
And don't forget to talk about all your involvement in community events, because without your volunteer base, we would really struggle to put those on.
Lions International has a tagline or a motto that says "We serve," and our entire purpose is to serve our communities. So for Victoria, what we do is we used to hold pancake breakfast. We can't do that anymore, unfortunately, up at the church. So we replace that with a couple of evening meals. We do blood drives. We do poinsettias for seniors. In a couple weeks up at Holy Family Catholic High School, we're going to be serving breakfast to 500 bike riders that are raising money for Habitat for Humanity. And we do a lot of fun events in the community, too, just to kind of bring the community together, like the Lions softball tournament and this spring fling. There's all kinds of things that we do. But one of the things that generates revenue for us, which we recently reacquired, is the charitable gaming. So when you buy pull tabs at the bars, the profits from that go both to the city and to the Lions Club.
Could you throw out some ballpark numbers on that charitable gambling? Do you have any?
On how much we bring in?
Yeah.
Well, it's tough to say because there's all kinds of fees and taxes that we pay to the state of Minnesota. But I would say that our net profit from it can be anywhere from $50,000 to $75,000 a year.
And how much of that do you donate?
100% of it. 100%. Mm-hmm. Lions are strictly nonprofit.
Perfect. Thank you. Council? Anything else? Lori, just a quick point of order. It's true that we have an operating agreement between the city and the Lions Club. And then secondly, I heard you mention that the building would be donated to the city at some point in the future. Is that a verbal agreement or is that in this operating agreement?
It can be written for sure. It's definitely. I think it might be verbal. I'm not sure. This process has been going on for a while, but considering that it's already owned by the city, we're making improvements. So what we had talked about doing was doing like a long-term lease while the improvements were being done, where the Lions would act as the general contractor. We would hire and make sure that all the subs get paid, and then as soon as it was completed, we'd turn the keys back over to the city, kind of like a rental property improvement. That's how we anticipate it.
Thank you. One other point of order. Lori, the council can go ahead and make a motion and approve this expenditure tonight. Is that accurate?
That would be accurate. As we go forward with any of the projects that we would be leading, we would go through our normal processes for awarding bid and come back to the council if those items were exceeded $10,000. But certainly, if you wanted to make a motion regarding the initial $44,000 contribution, that would be fine.
All right. At this point, would any council member like to make that motion?
Sure. Can you get me back to the amount? Where is the amount? Thank you. I move we approve an expenditure of $43,270 for use in improving the current structure at Lions Park.
Is there a second?
Second motion.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
So is the next step then to have the community conversations, et cetera, and?
That's correct. We had previously identified that the council would like us to have a neighborhood meeting. That's not a step that's called for in the type of approvals that are needed here. They will need to go through the planning commission process and city council for building materials and site plan approval, and we will schedule a neighborhood meeting prior to the planning commission hearing those items to gather feedback so that when that comes to you, you'll have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next item, pool committee. Ann, would you introduce this topic, please?
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. This evening, just basically an informational piece for you on the draft feasibility report. Just to give a little background on this, back in actually 2015, when the community survey was completed, both the indoor and outdoor swimming pools received rather high marks for wishes of the community. So in 2016, some residents, and in particular Julie Hesse on the Park and Recreation Committee, was really interested in pursuing, what it would take to construct a swimming pool within the community. Back in April of 2016, the council authorized the creation of a swimming pool committee and also approved an expenditure for a feasibility report that includes programming, design, and analysis, financial analysis of programs, revenues, and costs of construction. The pool committee actually also assisted with keeping some of the costs down of the project, to do some of their own research, meeting with community members and also stakeholders that would utilize the pool. They also conducted an online survey and assisted the consultants with the programming and different design models and 5-year forecasting for this report. The city did contract the services of USA Aquatics along with the Isaac Sports Group and Hay Dobbs to complete this feasibility report. And I know tonight two of the consultants are here. And with that, I'm going to introduce Dwayne Prohl, who is with the Isaac Sports Group, to begin the presentation. Then Tom Schaefer from US Aquatics will also be starting or be helping out.
Thank you, Ann. Please, for the record, state your name and your position.
My name is Dwayne Prohl. I work for the Isaac Sports Group, which is an aquatic consulting company out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I have the office here in Minneapolis. So Stu Isaac is the president of our company. I'll get started, and then I'll turn it over to Tom. Just a brief introduction. This is the part of a long process that we've been going through. So this really is to present to you a PowerPoint presentation, and then you also have the document in your hands right now. The idea is that we present this, you have a chance to mull this over, to go through it, and then you have a chance to give feedback and input back to either Lori or Ann, and they'll funnel that to us so that we can make then the appropriate adjustments based on your feedback and your input. We also are conducting 2 open public forums on June 22nd and 24th for the same purpose, to gather input from the public, to be able to see all the different different things that we have produced and gain their input. And after those open public forums, then we would factor that in. And then we would come back to the City Council meeting on July 10th to give an update and to submit all of the final documents then. So these are not final documents, and this is not the final presentation necessarily. This is as of today, so that you have the opportunity then to give us feedback. With that said, I'll turn it over to Tom Schaefer. And I'm not sure which button I push. I'll let him find it.
We need another Tom up here, so please state your name and your position.
Tom Schaefer, President, U.S. Aquatics.
Thank you.
What the first image we have up here is just to kind of let, and again, this is all in your packet, but it gives you kind of the conclusion of what we came up with in terms of what this facility is going to look like. So you maybe can keep that in your mind as we go through the presentation. I do want to start with the team. The team is made up of us consultants and the pool committee as well. So myself, U.S. Aquatics, project lead for design, estimating, costing, and operations. Gary Hay with Hay Dobbs, architect. They worked on design and site analysis. Dwayne Prawl, who just introduced himself, mostly concentrated on the financial forecasts. And then Stu Isaac gave a lot of input, president of Isaac Sports Group. So the team continued, which is the pool committee, made up of Julie Hesse, Jackie Craigmeyer, Mile, Kim Duick, Jessica Gunderson, Sarah Lake, and Jeff Richter. The process and methodology that we used in going through this report to date, initial discovery site visits, which started in December, continuing with meetings in January, February, and March, meetings with stakeholders, and also the pool committee helped with a lot of this engagement with public and site visits and other regional facilities that were comparable to what is the vision of here in Victoria. Presenting the preliminary study documents and finding to the Park Board of Victoria. That was done on May 15th. And then gather the feedback, factor in assumptions, evaluate program model, develop final 5-year financial forecast, develop final space program allocation, produce final conceptual drawings and renderings, and develop all final study documents. And then I'll go into a little bit more detail on those, starting with the feedback assumptions for the study. Some of the assumptions made early on in those earlier meetings that we had with the pool committee was to start with an outdoor aquatic component, assume recreational center park site, begin with the $5 million project target, develop phase plan for enclosing the multi-purpose pool somewhere in the future, and sustainability. Further program development then preceded this, which the priority of the pool committee was to do an aquatic recreation and leisure facility, family and fun orientated, be inclusive of all ages, special needs, and underserved populations, water safety and learn to swim programs, therapy and rehab, competitive training and small events, swimming and masters and triathlon training, senior aquatic programs, diverse scheduling to get as much use out of the facility as we can, and then partnership potential. This next slide shows you a lot of the images related to those program elements that the pool committee defined in the study process. A wider range of aquatic activities that can be done in a facility such as this. The guiding principle for aquatic development that the pool committee established was to build multiple pools to provide multiple water temperatures and multiple water depths with multiple amenities that allow the aquatic operation to provide a diverse population with a diverse set of aquatic programs meeting the needs of a wide range of users. There we go. Sorry. Now, in doing that, in establishing those programs and that, we do come up with a space allocation to carry out those programs. The first slide you see here is really the support structures for the water, for the aquatics needed at a facility such as this. So locker rooms, men's and women's locker rooms, a space allocated for that, family and disabled changing rooms, those with special needs, mechanical room, facility management and staff offices, lobby, vending, entry, access control, concessions, coffee shop space, storage for pool and pool functions and office equipment. Then what was developed is to sustain these programs was the requirement, or really what came out of this was to have multi-bodies of water, which was one of the guiding principles. The first one that we're showing here is the larger one, the multi-purpose pool. To do all those programs, it really took about over 12,000 square feet to accommodate those program use. That also works out for the dimensions of a good competitive pool as well, so we can truly say that this is a multi-purpose facility that the pool committee is designing. So that pool is going to be 80 to maybe 82 degrees, dimensions 164 feet by 75 feet. There'll be 10 7-foot 6-inch lanes in that 164-foot dimension, and probably 20 to 22 lanes possible for training in the 75-foot dimension. Depths would range from 3.5 feet to 13 feet, so from fairly shallow, which is actually the maximum depth in the shallow end allowed by pool code, and would go down into 13-foot deep for those deep water activities. Again, that surface area, the water surface area, is 12,300. The immediate deck surrounding that's 8,070 square feet. There are 657,000 gallons roughly in it, and then to allow for seating around the deck, an open patio, sun deck seating, green space, and some shade elements as well. The programming for that multi-purpose pool, open recreation, aquatic activities and play, team, masters, and triathlon training, recreational programs and activities requiring deep water, such as diving, scuba, deep water aerobics, aqua climbing, drop slides, anything of that requires it, even deep water treading lessons and learning. Active, high intensity, and low density aquatic fitness, swim lessons and pre-team programs, free open swim and play, lap swimming. Now on to the other body of water, which is the recreational pool. That body of water would be, since it's separate and each body of water has its own independent operating system, that body of water can be a little bit warmer in temperature for those programs that require that. So that one would be about 87 to 98 degrees, and it would have a zero depth beach type entry and then go down to a maximum depth of 4'6". That one would hold roughly 79,000 gallons, about 1,800 square feet of water surface area. And then that one has a little bit more in ratio, a little bit more deck area around it for leisure, sitting and relaxing. The recreational leisure pool programming would be open recreation, water park, aquatic leisure, sports recreation, more of that water park atmosphere in it, water aqua exercising, learn to swim programs so that you have plenty of room for different age groups and different levels of learn to swim programs, lifeguard and water safety classes, and quite a few senior programming as well, especially fitness programs for seniors. With that, when we get that done, we try to figure out how we can accomplish all these programs within those two bodies of water, and Dwayne was instrumental in doing a sample schedule matrix.
Gotcha. This is just a sample here. I don't expect you to read that, but in your book you have the actual scheduling matrix. It will change as you move through this entire process. The important thing that I'm trying to do is connect the dots between the scheduling matrix, the financial pro forma, and all the programming, because they all have to match. In other words, we're going to show you, or you have in your document, the financial forecast. Well, that financial forecast has to have a scheduling matrix that matches it, because we can't tell you that you're going to make X doing this program and then you don't have the pool space to do it. So the dots that are being connected are the scheduling matrix, which this is just a suggested one, but it matches up with the financial pro forma, so they actually mean something together. So you really can't take one document separately from the others. They really are all tied together. That includes the space allocation. As we went through all the programming, we were able to determine with that kind of a program, which will match then your financial forecast, we have to have X amount of space in order to make all that happen. So they're all intertwined. So your space allocation there shows you the total square footage of the building, or of the aquatic area. The net also included in your book. You'll find it as an attachment. So you'll be able to look at the space allocation, match that up with the scheduling matrix, and the theory is that makes sense. The financial forecast assumptions, when we went through the financial forecast, and you have those as attachment 6, it's actually about 20 pages of numbers there. And obviously you can't read all those tonight. But on our financial forecasts, we really approach those on a very conservative basis. In other words, we make sure our expenses are estimated high and our revenues are estimated very conservatively or low. So really the financial forecast that you're going to see is really pretty conservative, and it's probably your worst case scenario. One of the things we have to say about that, though, we approach this financial forecast based on you actually have to work very hard to make that happen. This is not one of those cases where it just happens by itself. As you all know, there's a saying out there, if you build it, they will come. We don't believe in that at ISG. We believe if you build it, they will come if you marketed it correctly, if it is high-quality programs, if it is affordable, if it's all those things that a good business operates on. In order to make that happen, you really do have to try at this. So the financial forecast is based on an effort, a real concerted effort to make it work. So that means there's got to be, in your financial forecast, you're going to see marketing line items. You're going to see salaries that are competitive, because we believe that it's like any other business. It has to be run very effectively. Some of the financial assumptions and calculation factors, and I can't read those from here. I guess I can use Tom's. I should warn you that I am a senior, I am on Medicare, and I can't see anymore. The assumptions that we did on all the financial forecasts was that we were advised right away that we really want them to be sustainable, initial, and life cycle approach. So it's not only sustainable now, it will be sustainable over the years. So with that, you're going to see some things in there. It was operational expenses and revenues, program expenses and revenues. There's a difference between those. Utility costs, we know what your utility costs are. On all the expenses, as you go through that financial forecast and you look at expenses, those are spot on. We know how much you pay for electricity. We know how much power the pumps pull down. We know all those things. It's just arithmetic. As you are well aware, the hardest part of the revenue streams. Those are the ones where you really have to do a little more work to identify revenue streams. Expenses are relatively easy. So the utility costs really are pretty easy. We know the equipment that'll be on the pool. We know how much it takes. Staff costs, we factor in escalation. Down towards the bottom, long-term replacement maintenance accrual fund, you'll find that in there. That is the fund that we build into all of ours, all of our financial forecasts, because we know what the life expectancy is of all the equipment you have. We know what the warranties are, and therefore we can actually calculate that and build you out so that when all these warranties come off, and we really base it on worst case scenario, the second the warranty's off, it's going to break. So that's one of the assumptions we make. We know that their life expectancy is much longer, but so we work on that because we don't want to come back 10 years from now and say, oops, this broke and we don't have the money to take care of it. We want to make sure that it's sustainable throughout its life. Some key inclusions, you have those there. Some key exclusions that we have not built in. So you will not find any debt service at this time, property tax, or insurance at this time in there. Okay. The 5-year financial forecast, when it's all said and done and we got through all this, now this is just a real short summary of what it is right now. So as of right now, the financial forecast shows that on expenses, there's $344,271 in expenses. In total revenue, there's $464,856. So right now, we're showing that this facility can sustain by $120,585 on a season. Okay? Now, the data behind all that is in your packet. So you can go to that and you'll find these. This is just the 5-year P&L for expenses. I don't expect to be able to read that. Just wanted to give you an idea of what's in there. This is the 5-year P&L for revenue totals, but the data behind all that is included. So you should be able to go to all your appendixes and page through that, and we encourage you to. We got a lot of help from Tom Gregory already on this. He helped us a great deal on it when he was working with the park board. So we've already got a lot of input, and some of you have some very good skills in the financial area, so please do go through those. Be critical, and there's time for you to come back and give us input and feedback. Okay?
So part of our task with the pool committee was to do site options, not just concentrate on the rec center site, but to look at other options within the community. The considerations we used in doing that was land acquisition. You know, does the city already own it? Does it have to be purchased? Utilities, are they already extended? Grading of the sites, drainage, stormwater and wetlands, facility infrastructure, building needs, access and parking needs, central location, and development costs. So just keep those in mind, and which is what we did when we went through looking at the various sites. So we did look at, besides the recreation site, we did look at 5 other sites. The city building property, because there's ongoing operations there, was quickly eliminated from consideration. And JHL property, because it's a privately owned ongoing operation there, was eliminated pretty quickly also. So then we also looked at Bavarian Road, Kerber property, Marsh Lake Road. So the next one really is what we did was we also looked at the trail system with going through Victoria, and wanted to keep that in mind too, as this facility might be beneficial to be near and around those trail system as it was. So in looking at those, we then went going to each site. The first one that is on here is the Bavarian Road site, kind of at the south east end of town. We felt that the terrain here, the grading was a little bit of an issue, so was the wetlands in the lower portion of it, more to the southeast. and that it wasn't fitting all of those considerations that we wanted for doing an aquatic center there. The Kerber property, good piece of property, fairly level. It also is on the north side of the Holy Family site. Actually, in that right-hand corner, you can see a vehicle parked there from the Holy Family. We do think that this site has long-term potentials for the city, maybe joint ventures with the school and the city for other recreational use, but probably not the best site for an aquatic center. The Marsh Lake Road site seemed to be a little bit too far away, wasn't centrally located, a lot of expense with infrastructure to get out there, and rezoning, acquisition, those things. We eliminated that one, which did bring us back to the Recreation Community Center site. Again, we felt this was the committee, the team felt this was a good option because the city already owns it. There are existing utilities, grading and drainage is pretty well established. Stormwater, wetlands are established. Facility infrastructure is there. Does meet building needs, access parking needs. It is centrally located and well recognized. Adjacent to similar use facility and low development costs. So, if I can get my fingers to work. Site recommendations, and existing recreation center site was recommended. There is ideal synergies with the recreation center and the aquatic facility. It's properly zoned for use. There's good infrastructure established there, and in the old terms of location, it seemed to be the best location for the city. Then what we did next was we took all of the information we gathered so far, and we did what we call a fit plan. So we wanted to know if what that vision for an aquatic facility that the pool committee had, would it fit on this site? So this one demonstrates our fit plan, and shows you where the pool, all in yellow, would be the new improvements to the facility. So we have that multi-purpose pool kind of in the center, with the recreation leisure pool to the right or the east. Does have room for additional parking to the north. See support building there. We have some rental tents also factored into the financial forecast. We have the pool concession area that would serve not only the aquatic center, but could also serve the ballpark, the fields as well. The pool committee felt that that was a pretty good need and pretty good use to be able to serve both areas. It doesn't disturb the turnaround or the sidewalk around that turnaround. So actually it works very well if parents want to drop off kids at the facility. They're right there by admissions. One thing it does do is we relocate the soft play or the dry play element over to the east side. But you can see on the very east line, this does stay out of the wetlands. So we're very careful to protect that and stay out of that. The other thing that we can do is that the line around it, or in the lower right-hand corner, shows that in the future, if we did cover it, that definitely could be accommodated. And the last thing, right on the east side of the rec center, where you come out that door, there would be permanent bleachers or seating areas there. And then in between the two pools are removable or portable seating too that could be flipped up and rolled, so that if you have events, you can have more seating there, or you can get them out of the way if you need more deck area. Then the next slide would show you our design concept rendering, a little bit easier to read, showing the different elements of the aquatic facility. I think one thing I want to note is that that Zamboni room on that east side of that rec center, we did provide to make sure that we maintain access to that, so that didn't interfere with the aquatics, and the aquatics didn't interfere with that as well. But you can see a little bit better breakdown up on the north. One of the support buildings would be the pool equipment, storage, lifeguard areas, change rooms, and then to the extreme east there would be the admission, storage, and concessions. A multitude of activities in that recreation leisure pool as well, and providing some shade elements. The next slide really gives you a breakdown in square footage of what those elements are, and also in that upper left-hand corner gives you the bather load for the facility. This is the health code formula for establishing bather loads, so this would be your maximum allowed. So in a multi-purpose pool in the shallow water is considered any water less than 5 foot deep. That would hold 417 patrons. And in the deep water, the 5 foot to 13 foot, there would be an additional 250 people in that, for a total of 667 in the multi-purpose pool. In the recreation pool, that is 0 to 4.5 feet deep, that would hold 326 people as well. So the total bather load would be just under 1,000. This bather load also drives fixture count. The number of toilets, urinals, sinks, and showers we need is formula driven from the bather load, and then they're provided in the various change rooms that we're showing there, and the family change rooms as well. So this one shows you the depths of the pool. Also in that multi-purpose pool is an access ramp, so that those with that is a little bit more difficult in getting into the pool, don't want to navigate stairs, can go down the ramp. We do provide an aquatic wheelchair for those with disabilities that want to get into the pool that way as well. So it is very friendly for all people with needs. You can better see that relocated soft play element in that drawing as well. Of what this facility could look like when completed. The architectural renderings, so this first one you see is from the east looking west. You see the support building. And then one thing I do want to point out, if you look closely, is that there's a green stairway up to that 3-meter board. We don't do ladders anymore to 3-meter boards, we do stairs. And that's because we worked with the League of Minnesota Cities years ago and found out that they were charging excessive premiums for 3-meter boards. And when we investigated that, we found out that 9 out of 10 accidents related to 3-meter diving towers were kids that went up there, got scared, and couldn't get back down because they couldn't negotiate that ladder backwards and ended up falling off. So when we decided to put stairs on these, the League of Minnesota Cities looked at this and they have the same insurance premium for this 3-meter board with stairs as you would a 1-meter board. They feel it's very safe. Also, that platform is big enough so an attendant, coach, whatever parent can go up there and guide those children if they're a little bit scared going off their first time as well. But those are safety design elements that are going to be into the facility as well. The next rendering shows the facility from the southeast. Looking at it, you can see kind of in the background where those bleachers are and where the existing entrance comes out of the east side of the rec center. Gives you a good idea of the shade provided, some of the play elements in that recreational leisure pool. And then in the very lower left-hand corner, you can see a little bit of that dry playground as well. You can also see that we do encourage some plantings that are a buffer between that pool and that wetland as well. This one is really neat that we were able to capture somebody diving off that 3-meter board, so it's a pretty good artist, drew pretty quick. So, but that is pretty much what the facility is going to look like if you're standing at the west side looking east, maybe a little bit southeast as well. You can see that we have included elements that removable starting blocks, the 1-meter and 3-meter boards. If you look across the pool, you can see the aquatic climbing wall. And we do it in acrylic so that lifeguards and those staff can look through that and make sure that they can see the water. But the kids love these climbing walls in the water. They can climb up, touch the top, and then jump back into the water. The next rendering is what it would possibly look like if the multi-pool was enclosed. So we're trying to blend in with the architecture of the existing facility. What you see on the facade of that building are overhead doors so that they can roll up, become more of an indoor-outdoor feel to it as well. So it's not going to feel like an institutional indoor pool. That penthouse area you see is a higher area we need to support the height that's needed for that 3-meter board and 2 1-meter boards. You can see how the turnabout works for dropping off kids at the admission area as well. So there's lots shown there. With that, we'll get into project costing process and assumptions. So, in getting a probable cost estimate for the facility, they're based on certain assumptions that we make with the pool committee again. It is based on local construction costs and national pricing research and recent comparable projects costs. Construction costs are broken down very well in your binder there. So this is just running through what it includes. It includes a breakdown of the equipment, site work and infrastructure upgrades. Also in that cost breakdown is a 6.5% contingency for construction. Also in that are the soft costs related to contractors' general conditions, which includes their contractors' fees, bonds, insurance, etc. Those things, permits, those type of things, that's in that 6.5% markup. We also include architectural, engineering, professional fees at 8%. And then an annual escalation calculated at 5% per year. Operational mechanical systems. Dwayne's Performa is really based on a certain quality of equipment used to operate the facility. We do use very sustainable equipment, very green technology, and very comfortable for the user. Good water quality as well. This was a top priority too to the pool committee as well. So top priority being the water quality and the pool tank structure itself. Filtration purification. We no longer use the traditional sand filters anymore that require reverse flow backwashing and waste a lot of water. What we are included in this budget is regenerative media filter, so that it's a much better way of filtering the water. Filters it, if the sand filters filter down to 15 to 20 microns in particulate, the size of particulate they remove, the human eye sees down to about 30. So sand filters don't really filter much finer than what your eye can see. These regenerative media filters filter down to 1 micron in particulate removal. That's about the size of cryptosporidium. So we can actually filter out much of the bacteria and harmful organisms that are in the water with this filter system. Also, it takes 1/50th of the amount of water to clean this filter as opposed to sand. So this is very good, very energy saving, very conservative pool operations. Also would included, mostly we'll do the roughing. Being an outdoor facility, you already have UV with the sun. So if it's enclosed, we have it already roughed in so that we could add UV once it becomes an indoor facility. State-of-the-art chemical water quality controllers, good efficient heaters. We can now get 86 to 92% efficient heaters, sealed combustion, just like you have now in your homes. So we can save a lot of money on heating the pools. Heating water is still the #1 asked for amenity in pools. Over water slides or anything else, people want warm water. No more blue lips for those kids taking lessons. We have different pool construction methods that we can use. So we can use shotcrete or we can use a Murtha system. Those would come later, those decisions. But energy savings that we get off of variable frequency drives, so that drive controls the motor speed, which saves a lot of energy and a lot of dollars over time. Also saves on chemical savings as well. Water and water to waste savings because of the media type that we've chosen for the facility. And then long-term maintenance and replacement cost reduction because of those equipment that we're recommending for the facility. So project A total project cost estimate then in 2017 dollars would be, this includes the hard costs and the soft costs. The base plan would be $6.2 million, and that comes out roughly to $169 per square foot. The image of the future indoor facility, or the envelope of it called a natatorium, that building would cost be $7.9 million in addition to the $6.2 million. So you got a total cost, if you were to do it all at once, of about $14 million. Indoor pools are expensive, mostly because of the operating systems required to get that humid environment dried out and not ruin the equipment. So there's a lot of expense in doing the indoor facility. With that, the timeline for doing the project, and this is for the base project, so the outdoor facility. This timeline does not include time to do the natatorium or the building. Design with the community engagement would be about 3 months. Permitting, bidding, and contracting would be about 2 months. Construction sequence itself would be about 7 months. Commissioning, inspection, certification, move-in by the owner, 1 month. So a total project timeline of about 13 months. These facilities do create jobs both during construction and long-term, and Dwayne's going to take over. Back up, Dwayne.
Get the glasses out. Just to give you an example, so it really can mean something to you, because I know that a lot of communities really are keen on being green. I ran the University of Minnesota Aquatic Center for 22 years. Each year we used 1 million gallons a year to backwash and maintain those pools. With regenerative media filters, you'll use 15,000 gallons a year. Let that sink in a little bit. That's not just the cost of the water. That's the cost to heat up all that water, to balance all that water. And that's all that water that's being just put back into the environment and taken out of the environment. So really do have the very best of the equipment. In terms of the jobs created, there's, the construction jobs. I think you can read through those. You can see all those. You'll have new management positions, new part-time people, lifeguards, instructors. So it does create jobs both building and create jobs in running it. The survey results, really on the survey results, I can let you read that. We did do the survey. And on those, the one thing that we found out in surveys, this is one thing that we learned about surveys. People who are very passionate in favor of something, or people who are very passionate against something, generally respond to surveys. That's just the nature of the business. Folks that are in the middle, they okay, fine, it's a survey. I really don't care. But those that are passionate and those that are passionate for or against really respond. And I think that what you can glean from the survey that we sent out is there's a lot of people who are passionate for. And you can read those percentages and see that. We're looking at 88 to 92% of the people are pretty passionate for a facility. They're passionate to the fact that they're using other facilities. They're leaving town to go to other facilities to use. And 92, or glasses again, of all the respondents, about 92% of the respondents, or 89% of the respondents, said they would use an aquatic center if it was here. They would stop leaving town and they would use that here. We had anywhere from 10 to 12% of the people who were not in favor. So those results are listed in your book, and you can see those. But clearly, there are a lot of folks who are pretty passionate about wanting a facility here in Victoria. With that said, our next steps is, again, to gather information, input from you. Now is the opportunity for you to give those to Lori or Ann. She'll pass them on to us. We will make adjustments if it's appropriate for us to give you a call for clarification on some of the input you have. We will make sure that we do that correctly. We'll make the recommended adjustments to all the documents, and we will prepare for the public open forums. Those will be on the 22nd and the 24th here in Victoria. After the open forums, of course, the purpose of the open forums is to gain input from the citizens, to get their feedback, and then we'll put this all back together again in a final form and present that all at the July 10th City Council meeting. So with that, if there are any questions,
Well, thank you.
clarifications?
I'm assuming that there's probably questions. Who would like to go first on the council?
Just have a comment, I guess, or a couple comments. May I go first?
Yeah, yes, please proceed.
Number one, I want to congratulate the pool committee. They've done a wonderful job. This is a lot of hard work, and thank you for your assistance and guidance in that. This is a wonderful vision. I would love to see a pool like this within our city. It comes down for me one question, and going through the P&L, it's the one piece that's not in there, and that's how do we manage the debt service? And so I'm just trying to go through in my head and trying to understand what orders of magnitude might mean in terms of debt service. And so if it's phase one at $6 and some million, that's about $500,000 a year in debt service, round numbers. If there are 4,500 homes in our city and we do a straight line increase in taxes to support that, that's about $110 a home. And so does the city of Victoria want to pay that? That's assuming that the only way we can pay for this is to raise taxes. I think it's a simple question. Does the city of Victoria want to have that type of an expenditure or that added tax to cover the debt service? And then we start looking at grants and things like that to back it down. But to me, that's kind of the threshold of how to take this forward. We have to figure out how to manage the debt because the operating revenues do not cover the debt, much like our rec center is today. Or at least not today, what it was. Thank you. So that's the key question in my mind. I think it looks like a wonderful vision. Just got to figure out how to pay for it.
Can I address your comment?
Yes, I'm sorry, come on up. Please state your name and position for the record. Oh, you're Julie, aren't you?
I am.
I'm sorry, then your name and your address for the record, please.
Julie Hesse, 8360 River Birch Court, Victoria. I'm the chair of the pool committee and the person that came forward with the idea of the outdoor pool to meet the request of the citizens from the citizen survey in the year that Ann quoted earlier, because it seems like a long time ago. Councilman Crowley, to address the question about the debt service and where the vision takes us next. As I mentioned when I brought this forward, fundraising is a huge part of bringing the pool to Victoria. That's still a huge part. We have several detailed ideas about raising the funds and a fund with the city. So, for an example, if someone came forward and wanted to donate money to build the pool for that 6.2, because that's really what we're looking at is the 6.2 to do the outdoor pool. There would be a fund with the city that they would donate. The city would hold the funds for any donated funds for the fundraising issue of the pool. As far as the other parts go, what we want to do is reach out to the to the people. That's our next step, is a public forum sharing all this information with them and finding a way to pay for the $6.2 million to build the outdoor pool that doesn't fall necessarily in debt service or on the tax rolls or in bonding. If that ends up being a percentage of what we bring to the table, what we can allocate in maybe park funds and what we can do in bonding, that particular percentage or division or what it means for the bottom line for the citizens, we'll bring to the July 10th meeting. When we say this is what the citizens wanted, there may be parts of that program that they feel aren't important, so we change it. That 6.2 might move, might go down. This is what we did first was programming. How do you want to use a pool in the community? When they talk about the programming matrix, we went through all of that of how people are going to use it before we ever started saying, put a wall here, put a slide there. So it should match everything that we're going to do. We feel good about the involvement of the community. So the specific numbers will absolutely be with the July 10th presentation. And then those P&L numbers that you see tonight, all of those things will be incorporated into that as well.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions I can address?
I would just ditto what Councilman Crowley just said, is really we need to take more of a global issue on this at this point so we start to see the perspective of how we're going to manage this. For instance, you got the pool, which now, even though we have a $14 million model, everybody is saying we're just looking at the $6 million model, the outdoor pool. Well, we put together a proposal that's got 7.9 million for covering it. So, I mean, do we really want to just push that in the corner and not look at that long term? But other things, we've got the Lake Wasserman Park that we put on the table that we're going to have to fund over a period of years. And it's not just the cost of property, we've got to develop it. We've got other projects, and so the debt servicing on this thing is big, and a lot of it will be contingent on, you threw some conservative operating numbers up there. But how conservative are they? I mean, if we could get another couple 100,000 out of those operating numbers, that goes a long way to reducing the debt servicing without stretching the numbers. But this is so critical, because one of the things we said is when this project started is, in the course of this project, you got to tell us how we're going to do this. Because we obviously could just load it all into the tax rate, and I don't know if the citizens really want that. So the debt servicing is, I say, the biggest thing right now. We got to find out how much debt are we going to service, and what's going to cost, and how it's going to be paid for.
Right.
And that, to me, is more important than all these other things. I love pools, but tell me how it's going to be paid for, and don't go too far down the road, is what I'm worried about.
The reason that we were looking at the 6.2 and the committee asked the consultants to address the question of an indoor pool, because the citizens asked for an indoor pool. And so instead of looking at just the outdoor pool and providing those numbers and a plan and working that, we wanted to address those citizens that say, what if we wanted this to be indoor? And so we can look at those numbers, because that's what is important, and say, do we want to look at an additional $7 million to enclose it? Probably not at this stage, with the school district adding an indoor pool and the things that are going on with the city. But again, those citizens who asked as part of this study to know what an indoor pool would include, that's why it was addressed.
I just have one further question. I noticed the heated water, that's really good. Does that mean the season for using this pool is extended significantly?
It's not necessarily extending the season, but there's a great need for physical rehabilitation, and there are area medical communities who are looking for space for their patients for rehab, and those temperatures are required for those kinds of knee, hip, physical therapy needs. And that's another large revenue stream for that body of water.
Councilman Striegel?
Answer just a little bit more. Again, I want to remind you on the financial forecast, it is conservative. That is your worst case scenario. Fundamentally, what ISG does, we're so confident in our numbers that we can say that's your worst case scenario. If everything goes wrong, that's what it's going to be. If everything goes right, it can be significantly different.
You'll put that on a contract, right?
Probably not. But and in terms of the operational season, your effective operational season, of course, on an outdoor pool is Memorial Day to Labor Day. But an outdoor pool can be extended quite far. I mean, but you have to remember that all your lifeguards are going to go back to school. All your children are going to go back to school. So you would probably be able to extend a season to start in early or mid-May. You probably could get almost all the way out to October. And it would be used for training purposes. But in terms of recreational purposes, your really effective season is Memorial Day to Labor Day, and you'd have to analyze, do you have enough users in May and in September to offset the operational cost? And that's something that can be analyzed.
There's such a thing as senior lifeguards.
Yeah. That's true.
Councilmember Striegel?
Thank you. First, thank you for all the hard work. It takes a lot of dedication. I know you've put in a lot of hours and at a level of detail that helps really create the vision. And I think, if you're going to ask people to pay, it's one thing to say, would you pay for a pool? It's another thing to describe the programming and describe the uses and the ways that people's either access or frequency or ability to get to those kinds of facilities are improved. I think about, and I don't want to minimize the size of the bill. It's a big bill. It's the biggest bill that I think has been in front of me since I've been on this council in terms of, would you pay that bill? And, but I think, again, creating that vision and putting it out in a way that people can, look at it and say, yeah or no, from a truly informed position this is great. I feel like, at this point, we've really gotten a lot for the money that we authorized to get this study done. I think generally when you ask people about a pool, they say, yeah, it sounds great. And then they get the bill. And so, are they willing to still pay? Does it still sound great when they get the bill? We, as probably no different than any other city, whenever there's developments approved, there's money that goes into park and recreation core fees, and then a per lot fee, and all that money does things like playgrounds and trails and ball fields, et cetera. And even the field house, when it was originally built, was built with the idea in mind that not everybody plays softball or soccer, and that there should be facilities that are covered in that park and recreation core fund that serve all elements of our residents in the city. And so I wouldn't necessarily think of this as being strictly, do you bond or do you get fundraising or do you not do it? I think there's other approaches to it that need to be contemplated as well. With school district, even though, we know which way the population center is moving, but in this last round of referendum funding, they chose to go east or stay east, I guess, in that case. And in many respects, I think about access to the pools for parents to have either recreation or swimming lessons or just swim clubs, recreational programs, and having to go somewhere of some distance to do that. It's just another tax on your time. And keep in mind, the school district is like 55% of your property tax bill. So for me, having something in the community, as long as people understand what they're getting and what they're going to pay for it, is a real plus. And, the field house, the rec center, took some time to become self-sufficient, but it's reached that point now. And it was pretty controversial when it was first built as well. And again, I agree. People generally stand up and vote when they're really in favor or really opposed. But in between, there's not a lot of participation many times. So, again, I want to thank you all for the effort you put into it. I think when you look at how this could influence the community, it's kids can get to a pool that they couldn't have otherwise when their parents are at work, and they can ride their bicycle on the city trail system and get there. Water aerobics and things of that nature. I know in my own family that's been really key for my parents to stay kind of active and healthy, and it's low impact, and it's something that helps extend quality of life. And so I think there's a lot of places and ways that this is more than just, it's not just a splash pad for kids. This is something much bigger than that in my mind. And again, so are the dollars, so it has to be carefully considered. I wonder, there was a 3-month time slot in there for community engagement, I think, or public engagement. Does that contemplate a referendum? If we needed to create a referendum to go for public bonding, would that be in addition to that 3 months for public input?
No. Tom, do you want to take that one?
It could run parallel with it. So we've done that in other communities as well, is that if this would go to referendum, we can run those parallel with each other so that we're not taking up too much time. Let's see. We did that in Spring Grove, La Crescent. There's several other communities where we've done that in parallel.
Okay. Do you have a rough idea? I know there's an expense to doing that as well. Do you have a rough idea what that looks like?
To run a referendum that would not fall within the general election, I would guess it's going to run $6,000 6,000 to 8,000 to run that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gregory?
Thanks for all your hard work. I think a pool would be a wonderful amenity to our community. Both my daughters swam competitively, and we traveled around to a lot of these pools in the area, and it's a great event. It's almost a carnival-like. We have teams coming from all over the state for these types of events, and I know that's not the only reason you'd want to build. It's a lot of recreation for the community as well. So it would be a neat thing to have. But again, there's the money issue and trying to figure out how to pay for it. I'm just kind of curious if part of the open house, if you'd be willing to ask questions about or have people submit, would you be willing to pay? How much is too much? Would you be willing to pay $50 or $100 a year, or your taxes? Have that part of the
The
open
financial
house.
aspect is part of the input that we'll be requesting
Okay.
at the public open houses.
All right.
And they're set to be about 4 to 7 that Thursday. I think it's the 22nd. And then 10 to 2, both at the rec center, weather allowing, where the pool will be, right outside the back doors of the rec center. Okay. So we're hoping to be able to accommodate everybody's schedule, those that are up north on weekends. So we're doing it during the week as well.
All right.
Commenting on what you just said, Tom, is that, we did the program analysis, and then I hand that off to Tom, and Tom delivers the design. And Tom has delivered a great design in that one of the things we try to do is design a facility so that we can do some events without having to displace our daily users. We all know that the daily users really pay the bills. But the events are also important. So the analysis of the events were very carefully done. We're not going to do events every single weekend in this pool. And when we do events, they're going to be designed appropriately so that we can keep the water park element going, so that parents and children don't get displaced just because we choose to do an event. And that's very important. And the design reflects that and how we would accomplish that. So you're absolutely correct. The events are very cool. It's carnival-like. They are a very good revenue stream, but you have to do them intelligently so you do not alienate your daily users. You don't want to lose a weekend just because you're doing an event. So,
in terms of use, Hutchinson just opened their facility, and a week ago Sunday, which is the 4th, I believe, yeah. Our projections would be on weekends they would have 600 to 700 people at their facility. Sunday the 4th, they had 1,400 people go through their facility. So it has a lot of the same elements that this facility will have. So they're highly successful. Last Saturday, when it was so hot, they also hit 1,300 people at that facility. Sunday wasn't so good because of the storm, but hit Hutchinson pretty hard with the winds. But these facilities do draw people, and these people will drive an hour, to get to these facilities to use them. So they are quite popular, and if you got the right user fee, they'll pay for it.
Okay. One comment. I'd love to see this and use this, but it comes back to me. I think this is going to be a question of priorities. And to give you some context, I think most people are aware that the county passed the transportation tax. That's going to end up driving some new transportation projects. Those projects will be coming through Victoria, and they'll have to be funded. We've got, as Councilmember Vogt said, we've agreed to buy the Wasserman Park. That was unfunded. That's $875,000. In addition to that, in the parks and trails, there's neighborhoods that aren't connected to regional trails. That has to be addressed. And then third, in discussions with staff, we know that the stormwater ponds, as far as water quality in Victoria, need to be dealt with. According to when I last spoke with Kara and Lori, we think that's going to be a statewide issue. It's not just Victoria because of the standards that were in place years ago. We don't know what kind of a financial burden, if any, that will bring to Victoria when that comes forward. And we don't know the timeline either. But when I look at this pool, I'm thinking long-term, we're going to have to fund roads, I think, is going to get priority over this. I'm not sure where the public, if they would want Wasserman and trail work before the pool. And then the idea of actually bonding, to Councilmember Crowley's point of view, roughly $500,000 in debt service, right, and raising taxes for that. If we were to do that and the residents wanted that, then what do we do with these other items when they come up in front of us? So I know that there's going to be more public input. There's going to be more discussion on that. We're not going to solve that tonight. But I just think that there's going to be these other requirements that the city is going to have to do, especially when it comes to things like transportation. And we've already committed to the Wasserman. And that is going to, I think, potentially push this further and further down the list. Although I'd love to be able to see if, in fact, there's other sources or grants that could somehow take that burden off the taxpayer. So that's the only comments I have. Council, is there any other final comments or questions on this?
I think we need the pool to be a competitive community. Everybody wants it, but we need it. And we've got to make it work. It's just going to be very challenging, is what we're hearing here. There's working the dollars is going to be challenging, but we could probably do it. It's not going to be simple.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item, as a reminder for everybody, item D was deleted at the request of the residents. So with that, let's move to next, reports of city manager. Lori?
Thank you, Mayor. Just two quick items. First, I wanted to highlight the advertisement that's in your packet looking for mentors for the Carver County Veterans Court. The Veterans Court is a very progressive program that our county and many volunteers have worked hard to implement. And one of the things that's key to its success is having volunteers who are veterans themselves that can be paired with folks that are going through this program. Basically what the court does is it recognizes that in some of our veterans, particularly those who have served in wartime, initial brushes with the law can be identified and the root causes of PTSD or other mental health can be dealt with before those problems progress. Again, great program, but is very much in need of folks that would volunteer. And there's a phone number in the packet, or if anyone wants to just reach out to the city, we could get them connected with that veteran mentor coordinator. And the second item was just quickly to ask the city engineer to give a brief update on the Zumbra item that was postponed and give you an idea of what will be coming in the future.
Thank you. Hi, Kara.
I'm back, Mayor and Council. Not usually standing up here. It's a different viewpoint. So Lori and I did meet with members of the Lake Zumbra Lake Association today, and they did specifically request that we remove the item that we had on the agenda today. That was to consider installation of a backflow preventer between Zunny and Zumbra. They have some other ideas about how they'd like to maybe see the city spend our resources. So they asked us to hold off on that so they could have some more time to bring forward some ideas that they have. But the information that was included in your packet originally is good background information for when that comes back. So if you have an opportunity to review that, and if you have any questions for Lori or I, feel free to get in touch.
Thank you. Bob?
Mayor, Council, I don't have anything I need to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Crowley, reports?
Please. Since I unfortunately missed the last meeting, but since that time I did attend emergency management training with the county in responding to emergencies, and just a quick summary of the discussions. And I do think there may be some things that we should consider as a council. But in general, what they described are the procedures for declaring an emergency and extending an emergency and who has the power to do those things. That there are two primary groups of people associated with the emergencies. There's a policy group, and then there are the emergency responders. And they spent an extraordinary amount of time making sure everybody knows who they are. And it's important for us as a policy group to not interfere with the responders. And to that end, it's recommended that we identify locations where the policy group go in case of an emergency. And what immediately comes to mind is obviously City Hall, but we probably should also identify a backup in case there's a problem. And that's something that I would ask staff to formally identify. But with respect to the policy group, our responsibility is to provide resources and ensure that the responders have everything they need to respond to the emergency. And our primary role is in escalation, and there's an escalation procedure that we can go to the county, to the state, national, that we have to follow as a team. But it was a very worthwhile session, and I recommend it to others that if you'd like to attend when it comes up again, please do so. Thank you.
A quick point of order. By any chance, did they give you anything that we could get to Lori and get passed out to the rest of the council?
I believe that if city manager was to go to either the lady at the county or the gentleman at the state level, they have a booklet that could be passed out to everyone.
Lori, would you mind checking into that, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Strugel?
No report.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogt?
No report.
No report.
With that, just one quick update. On Sunday morning, I went out and I happened to bump into some of the public works and fire personnel that were responding to the storm that passed through. And I'd just like to publicly thank them for their efforts in going out and responding. I know we lost power to some of the pump stations. Public Works was right on it. And then the fire department responded to some downed trees and some other things. And so to all that staff that came in Sunday, I'd like to thank you for all of your help and your support to the city. And with that, I have nothing else. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned.